All right, I would now like to introduce Dr. Harold Johnson, who is going to lead the presentation tonight about 7 strategies to enhance the safety and success of your children. Harold, would you just start by sharing a little bit more about yourself?
Sure, Carrie. This is Harold. Everyone, I began teaching children who are deaf and hard of hearing in 1971 in Memphis, Tennessee. In about 73, I think it was, I became the administrator responsible for the program, serving about 240 kids with deaf and hard of hearing. Later, I also took responsibility for the programs working with kids who were autistic. Along the way, received a master's degree in emotional disturbance and vocational rehab because many of my students had some emotional realities and also they needed jobs. As I was kind of going towards increasingly being kind of groomed for even additional administrative responsibilities, I realized that I just did not know enough. And I thought that if I could simply have a chance to go and read and think and study, I could actually know what I was supposed to be doing as a teacher and as an administrator. So I went to University of Cincinnati and worked with Richard and Laura Kretschmer and Bert Truax from 77 to 1980. And that's when I realized that we want to know a lot more than we know. As professionals, we spend our entire careers learning and asking and talking with our colleagues and with parents. But in reality is that we need to know a great deal more. But having graduated in 1980 with my doctorate, I began then working at Kent State University in 1980, preparing individuals to be teachers of the deaf. I was there until 2006 when Michigan State University made me an offer that I couldn't refuse. Probably should have, but I didn't. Went to Michigan State then from 2006 until 2013 when I retired. And in 2006, when I arrived there, being a senior faculty person, being in a great university and having a good position, I thought that it was time for me to challenge myself and to take on a task beyond the technologies, in example, deafed.net and the use of technologies to enhance learning and reduce isolation and recognize excellence. At that point, really just because I thought, what's next? What challenge can I give to myself? I took on the topic of child abuse and neglect as experienced by kids with disabilities. And I will tell all of you guys that in all those years of education, with a bachelor's degree in deaf ed from University of Tennessee before I began teaching in Memphis, and being a teacher and administrator and academic, never during any of those years did I know anything more about abuse and neglect of kids with disabilities beyond the fact that as a professional, I was a mandatory reporter. I didn't know really what to look for, how to report, or what would happen. And God knows I knew nothing about how to actually prevent the abuse of our kids. So in 2006, I began studying and thinking, and shortly thereafterwards, I had a chance to talk to Leanne Seaver and then Janet George. And Hands and Voices is the first and really the most prominent group that has been working on this topic and is not flinching away from the hard realities that our kids experience. So I retired in 2013, and this is kind of what I do during my retirement in terms of when I'm otherwise enjoying life for my grandchildren, is trying to understand and then to share that understanding with everyone. And I'm so honored to be here with you guys. But how to prevent, or at the very least recognize, understand, and report the abuse of kids who are deaf and hard of hearing in this case. Carrie, is that enough, or was there more?
That's perfect.
Okay. As we talk tonight, note that there's a number I'd like for all of you guys to write down if you've not already done it. It's quite simple, but it's quite important. The phone number is 1-800-4-CHILD. So 1-800-4-CHILD, A-C-H-I-L-D. And this is a 24 hours a day, 7 days a week hotline. It's confidential. It's free. It's run by childhealth.org. It's one of the charities that I support. And counselors are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to talk to anyone who is concerned about the safety, either of their own safety, be it a child or adult, or safety of someone else. If during the course of this conversation you realize either your own situation or possibly one of your children or someone in your family or someone in the community that you're concerned about, but you haven't known what to do or you weren't ready to call the police, call 1-800-4-CHILD and talk to these counselors. It's completely anonymous. You're not making a report. You're simply saying, I have a concern. I don't know what to do. And the concern can be for yourself or it can be for a child. They will help you to understand what it is that you're seeing, what it is that you are feeling, They will give you information, and then you will decide, either the first call or the fifth call or whatever call it is, to call the police or call Child Protective Services. So note that, 1-800-4-CHILD if either you or someone you know is in trouble. And again, remember, our job is not to investigate. We're not the police. We're not Child Protective Services. Our job, as you'll hear from this presentation, is to listen to our gut and to act to protect kids versus not being unsure what to do or not wanting to get involved. Second, please note that I'll be talking to you guys about the Our Children project for Hands and Voices. And Our Children stands for Observe, Understand, and Respond. And for all of you guys, if you go to Hands and Voices headquarters website and you click on the Our Children link, you'll see all the information I'm going to be sharing with you, plus a great deal more, particularly something called Silence is Not an Option. There's a series of documents that we've written. And they go from explaining what we're talking about and why we're talking about, but most importantly, what are the various risks and strategies for safety and success for the ages of our kids. The risk of a 2-year-old are not the same as for a 12-year-old. And so we need to understand those risks, and we need to grow, if you will, as with our children. And then finally, I think all of you guys were encouraged, if you're able to or not, to go to YouTube and to look at a series of videos I had the honor to be involved with. And these are called the 7 Kid Power Strategies for Keeping Your Children Safe. And that's what we'll be talking to you guys about today. Kid Power is another charity group that I contribute, and I'm honored to be on their board as I am Hands and Voices. And they're one of the only groups I've found in the country that works not only nationally but internationally to prevent the abuse of kids, all kids, as opposed to simply recognizing and reporting them. So it's a great, great, great work. As we go along, please note that we're talking about really is just enhancing what you're already doing. I have 2 boys, 2 men. Now they're 44 and 39 years of age. But I also have 5 grandchildren. And I will tell you some things I do on a day-to-day basis for myself and for my kids and for my grandkids is, I check the expiration date of yogurt before I buy it. I buckle up my seatbelt before I drive away. I maybe wait an extra second or so before I cross an intersection driving, make sure someone's not going to be running it. And I'm cognizant. I watch, I observe people, be it, at a grocery store I just came back from a little while ago, or be it at the airport or anyplace else, and just to make sure that no one is looking at me in a way that seems threatening or that I'm okay. And certainly I wouldn't walk into maybe a dark alley where people are kind of pointing at me and say, come here, we want to talk to you, and otherwise I don't feel comfortable. I recognize situations that I need to avoid, and I have some sense of what to do. What we're talking about tonight, these 7 Kid Power Strategies for Keeping Kids Safe, is really an enhancement of what you're already doing. You already know that some of your kids maybe can't independently walk to school, and so maybe you have to kind of walk with them and make sure they know what to do. We already know maybe that some of your kids are not ready to start dating, even maybe that they want to, and so you have to talk to them about dating and what to do and what not to do and what to expect. We also know that some of our kids may have all kinds of technologies, be they phones or be they Xboxes or whatever else, where they're on the internet, and whereas what they're doing is appropriate and innocent, there's some deep, dark stuff out there on the internet, and we need also to be careful and to watch them and tell them how to be safe. What we're talking about today are 7 strategies that will further enhance your knowledge and ability to keep your kids safe. And as you guys already know, your kids cannot be successful if they're hurt, if they're scared, if they're afraid. If someone is actively hurting them, they can't. Their potential will never be recognized. So we're talking about both safety and success because they go hand in hand. And there'll definitely be time for questions, so please do kind of write them as we kind of go along. Again, I hope you had a chance, to watch that introduction, at least, to the 7 Kid Power Strategies. But I'm going to kind of go through each one of them for you individually. And as we do this, think about what you already are doing, and think about what I'm presenting to you is not that different as much as a further maybe enhancement or refinement of what you're already doing. The first strategy is referred to as put safety first. And it sounds simple, but what it says basically is that when you are concerned about a child, when you're concerned something's happening, imagine, for example, that you're at a grocery store and a kid is crying and the mother or dad is kind of losing it, and they're yelling at the kid and they're starting to shake the kid by the shoulder and say, shut up, shut up. And, you know, you don't think that's right. You don't feel comfortable about it, but you don't want to get involved. You don't want to say anything. You don't want to embarrass a person. You don't want to be embarrassed yourself. What that first one, put safety first, is that we have to act. We have to give maybe that mom a chance to take a breath, to recognize that she loves her child, and yelling at the child and shaking the child is not the way to get the child to calm down. But this idea of putting the child's safety over our own embarrassment or hesitancy to get involved, it's easy to say, but it's hard to do. And note that whenever you do get involved in this case, you know, you step up for the safety of a kid. You tell the mom, you know, that, wow, are you okay? It's something I can do. Would you like me to get you some water? Something to break that pattern. Not only are you helping potentially that mom to kind of catch her breath and for the kid to be safe, but you're also demonstrating for your kid and for that kid that you'll step up, that people will act, that people care about them. So the first one is put safety first as opposed to your own embarrassment. And note that the research would indicate that 80 to 90% of the people who see something happening, like in the park or a grocery store or wherever else, won't do anything. They don't want to get involved. They're afraid of being wrong. They're afraid of being embarrassed. They're afraid of the person getting angry with them. And kids get hurt. People who hurt kids count on us not wanting to get involved. So first one is put safety first, to put aside your embarrassment, and if you're wrong, great, the kid's okay. And you spoke up and you model for that. So that's the first one, put safety first. The second one is referred to as keep your radar on. Keep your radar on. And what that refers to basically is to be aware of what your kid is doing. Be aware of where they are and what they're doing and who they're with. And note that you always have the right to stop by, to say, ask the kid what's going on. That you always should be welcomed into any situation where your child is at. That you are aware of situations maybe that your gut tells you something is not quite right here, or I don't quite feel comfortable. And what this says is, keep your radar on, is to trust your gut and to drop by. And if it means that the kids are just playing and having a good time and you're just kind of, coming by quickly and you're reaffirmed, that's great. That's okay. You're also showing that kid, that your child, that you care about them. But this idea of trusting your gut and don't simply assume that things are right, but verify they're okay. And certainly as your kids get older, maybe you have to verify less frequently, or maybe you would verify it differently. But, that you have to keep your radar on. You have to trust your gut. And it's important for you to know what your kids are doing and who they're doing it with. And note that one of the biggest realities of our kids being hurt is that in 88 to 92% of the time, research as it exists, is someone either in the family or known and trusted by the family. It could be a neighbor, it could be a friend, it could be, an uncle or an aunt, whoever. But it's not the dangerous stranger. I mean, that happens. 8% of the time, 8 to 12% of the time, someone will snatch a kid, and that's incredibly horrible. But most of the time, it's someone we know and trust. Well, keep your radar on, and note that it's a perfectly approach to actually verify that that trust was well placed. So trust your gut. Number 3 is entitled, Listen to Your Children and Teach Them Not to Keep Unsafe Secrets. In reality, I would say to you that if your kids can be taught not to keep secrets, surprise is fine. It's Dad's birthday, next week, and we have a surprise party for him. Great. Surprises are meant to be, shared. Secrets are not. And a lot of people who hurt our children teach them to keep secrets. First, they're small secrets, like, don't tell your mom, but here's a candy bar. It's just, it's okay. It's no big deal. Or don't tell your mom, but, why don't you come over and we'll watch this crazy movie. I don't understand it, but they're doing some things, and I don't know. Let's watch together, like watching pornography. Or don't tell your mom, when maybe I was giving you a back rub, but it felt pretty good, didn't it? Well, what happens is that people who hurt our kids teach them to keep secrets, increasingly bigger secrets. Secrets that are confusing to the kids because they trust that person, they like that person, and sometimes what they do is fun and it feels good, like a back rub, for example. But after a while, the secrets get bigger and bigger, and the person becomes, starting to hurt our kids, but the kid is confused and they feel guilty sometimes. So teaching the kids the difference between surprises and secrets, wow, that's huge. But also, this idea of tattletelling. And again, Ari Vanderzand, who is a person in the videos that you maybe have seen, talks about that tattletelling is when you're telling something to get someone in trouble. Well, Joey, he didn't stand in line like he was supposed to. It isn't to help someone, it's to get them in trouble. Whereas telling is actually trying to get help, either for yourself or someone else. So tattletelling is to get someone else in trouble. Telling is to help someone who is in trouble, be them or someone else. And this idea of secrets, if our kids simply knew that secrets were not okay, that they don't keep secrets from their mom or their dad, our kids would be a lot safer. So that whole idea of secrets, no. Surprises, yes. Tattletelling, that's for getting someone in trouble. Telling is help someone who is in trouble to be safe. So a really key point. That's strategy number 3. Strategy number 4 is one, it's entitled, make sure your kids know that you care, that you love them, that you value them, that you will listen to them. And note that this also means then that kids not only know that you care, but that they have the ability to get your attention. You're driving home from school, you're late, you have to get dinner on, you have 1,000 things to do, and the kids are kind of whining, and one of the maybe kids is trying to get your attention, and you simply are too busy to focus upon them right now because you got stuff you got to do. All of us have been there. Well, what this talks about too is that the kids learning how to get your attention and saying, Mom, I need to talk with you. It's a safety issue. I'm afraid. Now, that sounds simple to say, but for some of our kids, be it saying or signing or combined, that's a pretty tough language. But the point is that kids have to know that you care, and they have to have the ability to get your attention when they have a problem, when they themselves are scared. I grew up in what I now describe as a Leave It to Beaver family, which is probably not good because that wasn't a real family anyway on TV, Leave It to Beaver. But I didn't know that all families didn't have, dads and moms who liked each other, who loved each other actually, that we had plenty of food and a good house, and and we were cared for, we were given opportunities. A lot of kids don't even know that maybe that idea of coming home and someone yelling at them all the time, someone saying that they wish they didn't exist, that they wish that they were dead, or maybe someone coming home and they're being hit, or they're watching their mom or their sister being hit, or that someone is actually, physically, sexually abusing them, or they're being left alone for days at a time. The reality is that when you're a kid, you don't know what's normal. You think that what you're experiencing is normal. So it's the idea of knowing that you care and actively expressing it to them and giving them a chance to actually, practice or to tell you that if and when that they're not safe, and to gain your attention so that you know how to respond. And if a kid does tell you that, by the way, that they feel unsafe and they need your help, please note that the key thing to do is to stay calm, to express that you love them, that you'll do anything you possibly can to protect them, and that together you're going to, address this problem. So it sounds simple, it sounds common sense, but I will tell you that for a lot of our kids, maybe they don't hear that enough, or they don't really understand it. Strategy number 5 is don't let your kids throw stones. And that really refers more to bullying in the sense that, imagine, for example, that if you're picking up your child and you're kind of waiting for them to come out of school, and you see some other kids kind of pushing and teasing and kind of taunting another child, and you watch them and you think, well, boys will be boys or kids will be kids, but you don't do anything. Well, the reality is that 50% of our kids with disabilities will experience bullying during the school years, but 90% of them, 90% will observe kids being bullied. And when they see us watching kids be bullied and we don't act, we're basically conveying to them that, well, that's okay. You shouldn't do anything. It was probably their fault in somehow. That the best thing to do is not to get involved. Instead, what this particular strategy talks about, don't let kids throw stones, is that you would intervene in a calm manner, in a respectful manner, in a way that doesn't hurt or belittle anyone. But you would say, hey, why don't you guys come over here? Why don't you guys maybe do this, or why don't you talk about that, or why are you guys so upset? He's really a pretty cool kid. So you're modeling for them that it's not okay for kids to be bullied. you're modeling for them how to intervene in a way that is respectful and doesn't hurt anyone and doesn't belittle anyone. And then you're also saying to them that when you see your friends being bullied or when maybe you're being bullied, that you should speak out, that you should do something versus simply accept it. You guys have all seen maybe movies or stories, certainly read newspaper articles about kids that experience bullying. And not only maybe did it impact, their self-perspective of themselves, not only their ability or willingness to ask questions or even wanting to go to school, but some kids have had some really extreme responses. Some kids have actually hurt themselves. So bullying is not okay, and neither is it okay for us not to act when we see someone being hurt. And our acting out in a respectful, safe manner, effective manner, stopping the bullying, is also modeling them for our kids what they can do when they in fact experience it. And it's incredibly likely that they will experience it. Number 6 is to assess your child and make safety plans. Again, I have 5 grandchildren, and I've had the chance to go take my kids, my grandchildren to the park and to a ski resort just recently, and to the grocery store. And my children and their spouses, trust me to do that. But I never really talked to my kids about, okay, if we're at the grocery store and we get separated, what should you do? I think that will never happen. Well, it does happen. Sometimes kids do get separated. So the point here is that that you make safety plans. And one of the safety plans that's talked about in this particular video is that kids know that if by some chance you get separated, be it at the grocery store, at a clothing store, at a fair, at after-school activity, wherever else it is, that they know what to do. And what to do is, maybe, to search for you very briefly, but otherwise then to go to an adult and to say, I'm lost, I need your help, or I can't find my mother or my dad and I need your help, and to interrupt the adult and to be persistent until they actually are safe. But to actively plan, okay, if you're going to go to the fair and by some chance something happens, this is what you need to do, and actively plan it. And something else that was suggested to me, imagine, for example, that if you're going to a fair or you're going to Disney World or where else it happens to be, and you take a picture, of the child and the family. Imagine, God forbid, that somehow the kid was separated from you, but you had taken a picture of them, and not only then had you told them what to do, going to an adult and tell them, I'm lost, I need your help. But also imagine that if you or their grandparent had a picture of them, how they looked that particular day, and how that picture might then help them to find your child and get you back with them, and he's going to be safe. But note that actively making safety plans. Imagine as your children grow older, and it's not going to Disney World, but maybe it's a matter of going on a date. Maybe they're double dating with other people. But imagine that you're talking to your son or your daughter, and you say, if when you're on this date and it doesn't feel right, something's happening that you don't understand or that you don't want to do, all you have to do is send me a text, and I will respond. I won't ask questions. I will come, and I will get you. You have that plan in place. So simply assuming that things are going to be okay is not okay. Benjamin Franklin, I think if I can get the quote correct, said that the failure to plan is planning to fail. Well, God forbid, it's worse enough, not planning well enough for that meeting or that task we have to do, but planning for our kids' safety, hard to imagine. I mean, it's hard to imagine any of us now getting into a car and not making sure that our kids are safely buckled in. Well, why shouldn't we also then be aware that things happen to kids when we're out in the community or even at home? That babysitter that we got to watch the kids so we can have finally a night out with our spouse. Having a safety plan not only as to what they should do if something happens, but also what should the kids do if something happens? How can they get hold of you? How can they tell you when they get home that something happened that they weren't comfortable with, that they don't understand? So making safety plans and to do, again, Ben Franklin, that failure to plan is planning to fail. Number 7 is to prepare your children to take charge of their safety by practicing skills. So again, prepare children to take charge of their safety by practicing skills. And what that really says is that simply talking about this stuff, not enough. You can talk to your blue in the face, and God knows I've given thousands of lectures during my course of my career. I'm not always sure, was frequently unsure if I was having any impact upon my students' knowledge or skills. But the idea of actually going, in that case, to students, to practicum or student teaching, that's where things kind of came together. Well, what Kid Power talks about is not simply being aware of these strategies, but actively practicing them with the children. Actively saying, okay, this is what you do in a situation, not just talking about it, but practicing. And the kids have a lot of fun, and there's research to back up. Not only do they have a lot of fun, but also they remember it. Part of the Kid Power strategies is also recognizing that sometimes some very simple strategies make a huge difference. Like, for example, that knowing that one simple act can stop most bullying and abuse, and that act is simply as pushing the hand away or pushing the person away. So if our kids know that something's happening, they don't feel comfortable, and they simply push that person away, dramatically reduces the likelihood that they will be hurt. And then if they can add that pushing with, no, stop it, I don't want to do that. Huge difference. Imagine someone breaking into cars, and one car is locked, and another car is not only locked, but there's one of those safety bars on the steering wheel. Another car is not only not locked, but the keys are in the ignition. Which one are you going to take? As a thief, you'll take the easy car, right? Take the easy way out. Well, the reality is some of our kids are pretty easy. They're very alone. They don't have many friends. Sometimes they don't have as much language as we might like them to have. Sometimes they're naive. And so this idea of not simply assuming that the person who is interacting with them is a good person, not simply assuming that anything that they ask them to do is okay because they're older than me or they're an adult, not knowing that they have the right to say no or how to say no, and then what to do if the person doesn't respect that right. Those are things that are practiced within this Kid Power strategies. That's part of the Kid Power strategy of not simply telling kids this, but then practicing it, and then the parents doing as well. So those are the 7 Kid Power strategies, and I hope as you guys listen to them, it wasn't any big deal. It wasn't rocket science, but it's even more important, isn't it? Just as it's important not to eat food that's gone past its deadline, or not good to be driving and texting, or driving and not buckling up, or trying to go out in a boat without knowing how to swim. Those are things we recognize as being risk, and so we work to prevent them. Unfortunately, in society, the topic of child abuse, neglect, and even in bullying is so abhorrent, so difficult, so overwhelming, we don't want to think about it. And because we don't want to think about it, we can't imagine it happening to our kids. And because we can't imagine it happening to our kids, we don't actively work to prevent this from happening to our children. And these 7 strategies are meant to make us not simply more aware, but to allow us, for our kids to be safe and successful and to practice it in ways that make a lot of sense, and they're not at all maybe scary, but in fact can be fun. So those are basically the strategies, and the 1-800-4-CHILD is the phone number. And on the Hands and Voices website, the silence is not an option are the age-specific guidelines as to both risk and strategies and resources. And one last thing before I open up, Carrie, for questions that you guys may have, or examples of what you guys are already doing to keep your kids safe, is that note that one of the things the Hands and Voices, and now a growing number of other organizations around the country are doing, is that we are recommending the inclusion of safety statements into children's individual family service plans, birth to 3, or IEPs, 3 through 18, or 21 rather. The idea is that we would not simply assume that our kids are safe or assume that our kids know what is normal or not normal or right or not right, but rather that we actively build in their self-advocacy skills, their language skills, their knowledge of their emerging sexuality, the knowledge of how to be safe as they get older online for our cyber safety, the knowledge of what to do, such as calling 1-800-4-CHILD if ever they are being hurt or unsure or they're scared, the language skills to express their emotions, to say that they need help, and that they have hopefully several adults in their life, their parents as well as hopefully some teachers that they can talk with and trust. Note that most of the time, the vast majority of times, kids who are being abused or neglected will never tell anyone. And if someone asks them, they will deny it because they're embarrassed, they're ashamed. They are much more likely to lie that they are not being abused or hurt than they are ever to lie that they are being hurt. And the reality is that most of the time, even when kids tell someone, they usually tell a friend, and that maybe a teacher may hear about it eventually, or another adult. Most of the time, we don't believe the kids. We kind of give them the third degree. We almost can feel like it's their fault. And in reality, systems, be they public schools, or in this case, the Catholic Church, you guys know about that, are much more designed to help protect the perpetrator and the system in which they work, as opposed to help the victim. And for our kids with disabilities, so many of them, they're great kids, but they don't always have great language, or maybe they always have great behavior, or they have some other difference that makes them a little bit different. I will tell you that most of the systems that are designed to even interview kids that are thought to have been abused are not designed for our kids. They don't know how to work with our kids. Most of the systems that are designed to work with kids that have been proven to experience abuse and neglect don't know how to work with our kids. And hardly anyone in the country is working on prevention. It's simply too complex, too overwhelming, and particularly not prevention of kids with disabilities. That's why it's such a cool thing that Hands and Voices is doing this, and I have a chance to work with Janet DeGeorge and Sarah Kennedy to do that. So I rambled on for quite a bit. Opening back up, Carrie, to everyone else, but again, questions you have about those 7 strategies or anything else related to this topic. And I would particularly be interested, too, what are some things that you're currently doing to help keep your kids safe and successful, broadly speaking, because there's a lot of knowledge on this phone call right now. There's a lot of skills and expertise, and I want you guys to recognize each other as well as maybe tap into the Our Children Project with Hands and Voices. So, Carrie, back to you, and hopefully some questions or comments from the people listening today.
Thank you, Harold. So, with that being said, those of you that are on the call, we are opening the floor to you. What questions do you have? What thoughts maybe are running through your head after hearing this presentation? What maybe are your fears of the potentials? Or maybe you've been in a situation or currently in a situation and are wondering how to go forth.
This is Harold. By the way, this question, it seems innocent, doesn't it, that Carrie just asked you guys, to recognize that in our society, talking about this topic, even the topic of prevention of child abuse and neglect, much less actual occurrences, is taboo. We don't do it. It's not polite. I will tell you that when I tell people what I work on, I rarely ever have anyone ask me a follow-up question. So by answering this question, you're breaking a taboo, but you're also turning on a light. And that light makes, if you will, the cockroaches who are hurting our kids scurry away. So every time we talk about this topic, it helps keep our kids safer. So take a risk, share a question, share an idea, share a strategy, so all of us can learn from this community that's on this phone call now.
Hi, this is Eva.
Hi, Eva.
Hi, I was just having issues, even going back for a while, with teaching our kids, my kids, the language that they need to identify different body parts and different sexual feelings and things like that. And then I really kind of struggled with that, being the mom talking to a boy. And then, trying to have my husband explain it in a different way. It's like, because, we think as moms, we're the ones that know how to explain it best.
Right.
And then also with the, ever since, they were little, we've always taught them that, you're supposed to listen to an adult and do what the adult says because, they know what's best and everything like that. And now kind of changing that whole mentality is teaching them that they have the right to say no when something is happening to them that's not right.
Right. Eva, you have several things in there. Certainly, most people. I have a video that I use for my presentations. You guys may have seen it in the last Hands and Voices conference, and it's from Planned Parenthood, and it's like this kind of shark thing, and like dun 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 dun, and it's a series of kids asking questions of mom and dad, like, will I get pregnant the first time I have sex? Or will I grow boobs? Or why don't I have a penis? I mean, all these kind of random questions, but it's done in a humorous way, but it's not humorous when a kid asks you that question. But I will tell you that Planned Parenthood has some really good resources on how to talk to your kids about this. And I will tell you, too, that all of us, all of our kids, regardless of how wonderful or exceptional or maybe challenged their bodies might be, they have a sexual reality. And unless they understand their sexual reality, they are at greater risk for someone hurting them. Roughly, the statistics indicate that 1 in 3 women will experience some type of sexual abuse during the course of their lives, and 1 in 10 boys. The incidence for boys is thought to be particularly low, underreported rather. So one is that it is critical. You certainly can put in maybe to the IEPs that your kids be part of the curriculum in the schools and where they talk about this. Hopefully they talk about it well during health class. But your kids have questions, and they have even fewer opportunities sometimes to actually get the right information. So you're absolutely correct, and Planned Parenthood has some great resources. They're also on YouTube. In terms of that second point about saying no, you're absolutely right. I mean, I wish all of our kids had in their IEPs that they understood they had the right to say no, what were the contexts in which they could say no, how, and then what to do if that request is not granted, and how that would change. You know, a 3-year-old maybe might say, I don't want to take a bath, but they still may have to take a bath. Maybe they have a right, you know, that they can take a bath without having their sister in the bathtub with them. Maybe that's okay. But, you know, then, you know, that 15-year-old who is starting to date know that they have a right to say, no, I don't want to do that, and then what to do. So it's absolutely critically important, and that being written into the IEPs. And your last point, Eva, was really critical, too. A lot of our kids are very compliant when it comes to adults. You know, they're asked to do stuff all the time that they don't really understand, but because the adult told me I should just do it, they're compliant. And that compliance without understanding is really a risk. So, you know, our kids asking why and knowing that if it doesn't feel right to them in their gut, they have a right to say no, and to keep saying no and be persistent. And even if maybe the person forces them to do something at that point, then to have the language skills, like they were hurt, they were scared, whatever the words would be, to tell you or someone so that maybe it's not repeated. Because what happens frequently for people who hurt our kids is that the hurts get bigger and bigger. It isn't so much that the person is getting a thrill out of hurting them as much as seeing how far I can go. What greater thing can I do? So the idea of secrets also kind of runs into play. So Eva, wow, great series of questions. Hopefully I gave you some information. But you're absolutely right. And for all of our kids to have in their IEPs the self-advocacy skills to say no, when, where, and how, and what to do, to have knowledge of their their sexuality and their body parts, and then have the language to share with someone when someone did not respect that right. Critical importance. Well done.
Thank you.
Other questions or strategies you guys already are using?
Hi, this is Allie.
Hi, Allie.
Hi. I came on a little late, so I'm not sure if I missed anything about this, but I'm a teacher, actually, with deaf kids, and we were told that we need to go to a special training before we're even allowed to teach any of these types of things. So I don't know if did you touch on that and I missed it, or is there something that you can suggest that you're saying that we can do without having a specific type of training?
And training, you mean in terms of human sexuality or in terms of prevention of child abuse and neglect? Okay.
Sex education, any of that type of thing, which kind of leads to, I mean, I would like to teach them about body parts and good touch, bad touch, that kind of stuff, but it sort of goes back to the sex education stuff where they say we're supposed to be trained. So I'm not really sure if you have any information I can bring to them and say, look, it needs to be taught regardless of.
Yeah. You know, one reality, of course, is I think now 88% of our kids are part-time or full-time in regular education classes, and so our teachers of the deaf are serving in a support role as itinerant teachers or resource teachers, you know, for our kids. And most of the time, the curriculum that our kids are experiencing isn't quote-unquote a deaf ed curriculum, but it's a regular ed curriculum. And it does certainly vary from school system to school system as to when human sexuality is introduced and how it's introduced. Some schools, I'm sure, don't do it at all, maybe because of their charter. I know of no particular curriculum I can refer you to, unfortunately. I will tell you that the childhelp.org used to have a curriculum called Good Touch, Bad Touch. The idea, of course, that any touch on otherwise that's covered by a bathing suit is bad touch. Well, the problem sometimes that maybe a doctor, maybe even a mom or a dad may have to, touch someone there. They have a burn or they have to have an enema, let's say, something. And sometimes the reality is that bad touch can feel good, especially as your sexuality is starting to emerge. Childhelp.org has a new curriculum called Be Safe and Speak Out. Speak up and be safe. Speak up, be safe. Unfortunately, even though I've asked them now for well over a year and a half to have a chance to review that to make sure it's appropriate for our kids, I haven't been able to review it. They have not made that accessible to me. So I can't really recommend it because I don't really know if it's adaptive for kids with disabilities. If you're working in a school for deaf, certainly, which about 9 to 10% of our kids are, that school should have, again, the same curriculums and should be involved in the health. What I've been told by parents and teachers around the country is that, yeah, that's covered in the health class and yeah, our kids go, but I don't know how much they understand. I don't know the extent to which in the kids' IEP that they have the specific ability to name the body parts, which is important, to understand the differences, when kids begin to menstruate or have night ejaculations if they're boys. So certainly there's a lot of strong feelings about, who should tell kids about sexuality. The reality, guys, is that the vast majority of time, someone who's hurting our kids is someone in the home.
Right.
And so we can't simply assume that everything is hunky-dory in the home, especially if our kids don't have the language to tell us it's not. So I don't have a good curriculum. I would suggest Planned Parenthood so far as the best place I have found for information. And you're right. For a lot of school systems, you may have to get the explicit information from the parents or a school system to teach it. I will tell you that I'm working with the Council for Exceptional Children in all 17 divisions about this goal of including a safety statement into kids' IEPs. And those documents that I mentioned that are on the Hands and Voices Our Children Project page, the Silence is Not an Option documents. The pages dealing with kids who are adolescents deal specifically with this topic, and there are some other strategies and other resources that are specifically listed on this topic. I simply can't name them right now, unfortunately. But again, you guys all recall when you were growing up, when you were getting into your pubescent ages, and all the questions and misconceptions that you had. Well, a lot of our kids have a lot more. Still the same urges, same body parts are all kind of happening there, but they have even fewer people that they can talk to and less access to information. But so far I would say Planned Parenthood, and then goes into particularly to the Hands and Voices Our Children Project, Silence is Not an Option documents, and look for the ages of the kids that you're referring to. There are specific resources in there, and we will further enhance those as we are going along.
Thank you.
Thank you. Carrie, do we have time for any more questions, or where are we at as far as your timing for this class, for this call?
Yeah, this is Carrie, and yeah, we have about 5 minutes.
Okay. So one last brave soul, either a question or a strategy. I would love to learn from you guys as well as try to share anything I happen to know.
Hi, Harold. This is
Hello.
Eliza.
Hello.
Hi. I can't really say. It's kind of a question, kind of a statement. I have 2 children. My older one's, I guess what we call our typical child, hearing child. My younger one's my deaf child. My older one, I have to say, quite young we started the talks. That was not even a thought of not. I think when it got a little scary is when she was about 6 or 7, and I had to kind of explain, and I didn't know how, that, that the bad touch can be from someone that you do know. It could be from anyone. And she started asking, like, well, what about a police officer? I'm like, yes. Like, well, what about this one? I'm like, yes. And I was like, it could be anyone, and I hated it. I was just, like, throwing examples, trying to make it kind of funny, but even had to say, like, family members and things like that, and it was so uncomfortable. And she's like, that's yucky. I was like, exactly, but you can always, always tell Mommy that. I was
right.
like, and you will never be in trouble. And to this day,
Right.
she still
Perfect.
tells me that she remembers that. I mean, she gets in trouble for lots of things, but that's not it. But the scary part is for, I don't know about all of us, but for my younger child, developmentally, she's nowhere near, I don't think, to understand, so I'm terrified. I mean, how do we explain this to our child? Which you already talked about that, but I don't even know where to start to have her understand. If you say, "Are you hurt?" let alone anything, she'll scream no at you and be very upset that you even thought that she was hurt. So to even make her think that someone else hurt her, she would be very upset about the whole thing. So I don't know if that's going to be something in the works for us, is to learn about how to help with that, to teach our exceptional children.
Well, a couple of things. One, I would tell you that my youngest grandchild is in first grade now, but for years, you can well imagine, I played tickle with her, and the like, and always even in playing tickle or peekaboo or hide and seek or that sort of stuff. It's always been a matter of if you say no, I stop. And then she frequently will test me and will say no. I said, okay, I stop. And then I'll say, and what happens if I don't stop? And we've got now, so she knows. I tell Mother, and and it's a game, but it's also one that she knows really quite well. And so one is a matter of this idea of such simple things as playing tickle or chase, that kids can know that they have a right to say no, and then practicing, and keywords practicing what to do if the person doesn't respect that. Second, in terms of sexuality particularly, one strategy again that Irene Vanderzand from Kid Power, whose videos are done by, is that a lot of homes, particularly maybe around the holidays, Uncle George, Aunt Mary, cousin Fred, or whatever else like that, people come in and kids are expected, to give them a hug, or to go over and see them, and maybe the kids don't want to do that. What Irene says is that respect their feelings. Let them know that, and maybe tell Uncle Joe that in our family we don't, make the kids give people kisses or to sit on their lap or to give them a hug. If they don't want to, we maybe teach them they can shake their hand or they can give them a wave. I will tell you that there's so many times when kids don't want to do something with someone, and subsequently we find out that that person wasn't being good to them. They may in fact have been hurting them. But we don't know how to read the kid's behavior. So one, not requiring, kids always go and see Uncle Joe or kiss Aunt Mary. That's okay to shake their hand or say hello. Second, note maybe that for a lot of our kids maybe don't have such great language skills, but we can read them, can't we? We know what they mean sometimes even when they don't sign it or say it. So helping others to interpret their behavior that, well, she doesn't really want that or she doesn't really like that. And then respecting them, learning to respect, maybe in this case, nonverbal behavior, saying no. But even practicing, and that's what it talks about for Kid Power, of what to do if someone wants you to do something. Well, how do you respond? And role playing, for example. And one thing I actually have on the list, and you remind me of that, is you're saying on the to-do list. Wouldn't it be cool if we can ask some of our older kids, a whole range of older kids, to do short video vignettes on these strategies and other information, whereby that they can, through video, be it through speech and sign, combined animation, whatever else, that they not only can demonstrate to us that they understand, in this case, the right to say no, but maybe can help our younger kids understand what that means. So it's not just us having to explain it to them. That's one of our goals, actually. And one final thing I would tell you on that is that I'm also working with a group of people from, well, actually from Illinois. Carrie's working with us, and people from Texas and Minnesota. And at the next Hands and Voices conference, we hope to bring a couple of quilts anyway, maybe 3. And the quilts basically will take these major concepts, like these 7 strategies, and have a visual representation, maybe a word or a phrase. And these quilts then can be used as a teaching tool for our teachers or for our parents. They can be used at conferences, Hands and Voices, to break this taboo of talking about this. Maybe even some of the really are good quilts, maybe we can auction them off, maybe such as the gala that was talked about earlier, to raise money so that we actually can do the training for professionals and for parents. Maybe have the monies, to help kids develop this multimedia YouTube examples that can help us teach our kids about this, while also then demonstrating that our kids who maybe are older also know and understand it. So there's all kind of possibilities, but I would tell you the hardest thing is what you guys have done tonight. which is people being willing to listen and talk about the topic of keeping our kids safe and successful. We can't assume that they are safe. We have to ensure it. And Hands and Voices is an incredible leader in Illinois as far as this conversation has been incredibly proactive. And I think actually in February I'll have a chance to talk with some of the Guide by Your Sides particularly. And we'll look particularly at what they can do as Guide by Your Sides to help parents to bond with their kids, to love their kids, to protect their kids. Because, you know, if parents don't know that's part of our job and they don't know how to do it, our kids will be hurt. So thanks for the question. There's hope. We simply need more of you guys working with us to make it a reality, a faster reality.
This is Carrie. Thank you, Harold, so much. And thank you all for being on the call tonight and the questions that you've asked or the comments that you've been able to share. I appreciate your time and your awareness of this topic. Like I said, if you want a copy of the recording, you can contact me or your parent guide, and we will get that link to you. And we look forward to seeing you next month.
Thank you all.
Thank you all for being on the call tonight.
Bye.
Good night.
Thank you.